Hey folks, this clip is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. Get $30 off your order of perfectly aged steaks, juicy burgers, and decadent desserts with our promo code VOLS, that is VOLS, Omaha Steaks.
But I think the main thing that came out of it that I don't want to say surprised people, but people were really happy to see was Hendon Hooker. And what exactly was that? Again, I was a little out of the loop, but there's been a lot of hype around him.
Yeah, really, and it doesn't really stem from the pro day because he's still not been able to do much. I mean, he was throwing some passes out there, but he was just kind of standing stationary, not really moving around, just kind of not really even rotating his hips, just kind of, throwing from a set position. I think he said he's supposed to start running straight in about 3 weeks. So he's on track to be recovered and maybe ready to go by late training camp, preseason, start of the season. So his recovery is going as he expected it to go, which is, a product of him working hard in his rehab. But yeah, over the past week or two, the hype for him with some of these drafts and these draft analysts, you're starting to see him pop up as a first round pick in some of these mock drafts. And you're hearing some of these things about, like you mentioned, scouts and analysts saying, hey, wouldn't surprise me if he's taken above Levis, like him a little better than Will Levis. And I think a lot of that just has to do with his demeanor. You've heard things about Levis's interviews not going smoothly. Not that it's kind of what we talked about. He tries to control how he's perceived instead of just being himself. And I don't think that goes over well with some of these NFL teams because they see through that stuff. I mean, they meet with tons of quarterbacks every year. They see through that stuff. And Hooker, you just don't get that with him. I think they're finding out that, one, he's a good leader. Two, he knows a lot more about football than people realize. I mean, he's played in 2 different offenses. I think people forget that he had that time at Virginia Tech where he was in a completely different system. So he really has this wealth of knowledge that he can marry together from his time there and his time at Tennessee and Josh Heupel's, unique offense. I think they're finding out that he's a lot more knowledgeable about the game than they really thought he was. Plus, he's athletic. He produced. He did everything. He was poised in tough moments. I mean, you see the end of the Alabama game. I don't care what the offense is. Those were 2 throws to the middle of the field with 15 seconds to go. All the pressure in the world on you in a tied game, and it's Tennessee's best chance to knock off their top rival in 15 years, and he executed it flawlessly. There's just stuff like that transcends measurables and arm strength and who your offensive coordinator was. I mean, at the end of the day is, can you go out there on the field and do it? And Levis didn't necessarily prove that. He didn't play in a ton of big games at Kentucky where he had these huge results, and Hooker did. So when it comes down to it, I mean, which one do you want?
Yeah, when it comes purely to football, I mean, who – and I don't know how an NFL scout could almost say anything other than this. 2-minute or 2-minute warning there at the end of a game. You got to get 7 points to win. Who are you going with? So far, with career history, Will Levis or Hendon Hooker, I mean, when you look at just everything that he's done, obviously you said it all there. So cool, calm, and collected. Such a great leader. He rallies his guys. His guys love him. He obviously he went out there and genuinely proved it against Alabama and has proved it at Kentucky last year. They had an extremely close game with Kentucky. They won that game. He's beaten Levis twice. Obviously this year it wasn't much of a game, but you just look at those 2 comparisons or 2 guys and compare them. I mean, who are you choosing in that situation?
Spring is in the air, and that can only mean one thing: spring grilling. The steak experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to spring into something delicious with their semi-annual sale. It starts Wednesday, February 22nd, so make sure you mark your calendar and get 50% off site-wide. Grab all your favorites like perfectly aged tender steaks, ocean fresh seafood, juicy burgers, air-chilled chicken, and decadent desserts. Plus, when you go to omahasteaks.com and use promo code VOLS, that is VOLS, at checkout, you'll get an additional $30 off your order. It's the perfect way to get fired up and spring into something special. Don't wait. Go to omahasteaks.com and use promo code VOLS at checkout and take advantage of this deal. I've had Omaha Steaks plenty now. It comes right to your door. So convenient, so tasty. Can't recommend it enough. Go and get it. Omaha Steaks is ready to ship your order right away, and you're going to want to hurry because 50% off site-wide is only happening for a limited time, so don't miss your chance to save. Visit omahasteaks.com. Use promo code VOLS at checkout and get an additional $30 off when you shop their semi-annual sale today. Again, it starts February 22nd. Mark those calendars. and get your Omaha Steaks. Minimum order may be required. That's Omaha Steaks promo code Vols.
With the knowledge that we have so far, obviously the NFL is a different animal, but I also look. Then you move to the off the field stuff with Hooker. Extremely hard worker. He will be, if he becomes a franchise quarterback for you. And the jury is out in terms of if he will have that ability. We'll just have to see. But if he did, can you think of a guy who would be a better ambassador for your team than him? You know he's not going to be off the field trouble. You know that he's going to go out and he's going to speak eloquently and he's going to be a great just representative for your brand and your team. And he's going to be a good leader for your guys. He's already, he comes built in older than almost all the dudes on the field. I just, yeah, you look at that. Obviously, we see everything through orange colored glasses. And it is what it is. But just I don't know how people look at that situation outside of the injury. Obviously, the injury is a huge piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
But if he can recover 100% and be the guy that he was at Tennessee for the bulk of this past season, I don't know how you rationalize at all that Will Levis is the dude over Hendon Hooker. And that wasn't necessarily the thrust of this. We didn't mean to directly compare them this entire time, but I think it's the correct way to have this conversation because they are getting compared out there in media circles. So obviously, I'm sure Kentucky fans would have some sort of comeback to that. I don't know what it would be, but I'm sure they could come up with something. But I just don't see it. And I hope the best for that kid. I want it so bad. He should be rewarded after how bitterly that season kind of ended. And for him, I want to see him get his due in the NFL. But we'll see in a few weeks whether it pays off.
I will say one thing with Hooker. Do you ever wonder why like Kyler Murray was just this consensus number one overall pick after playing in an offense at Oklahoma that's, modeled after an air raid offense? That's what Lincoln Riley had learned, from being in those offenses at Texas Tech and East Carolina. It seemed like Kyler Murray kind of got a pass for that. And he was undersized, had the baseball stuff going on. Obviously, there's been off the field stuff with him, which has really only grown since his time in the NFL. All these red flags with him, and it was just like, no, he's the number one pick. And Hooker, while Murray, obviously his numbers were a bit better at Oklahoma than Hooker's were at Tennessee. And a lot of that's because Tennessee's offense was extremely balanced. People don't, forget that, they had more rushing attempts than passing attempts, and their running game was really strong. And you had two running backs getting close to 1,000 yards last year. That's the reason the numbers weren't at the same level as Murray's, but it's just odd how Murray kind of gets that pass and gets that, hey, he's going to be the guy. And Hooker's like, well, maybe he'll be a first round pick. And I know, like you said, the ACL is part of it, but there's no consideration for Hooker to be in that Stroud and Bryce Young top two conversation at all, even though he beat Bryce Young, head to head, went 1-1 against him and never got the chance to play CJ Stroud. But I think we know that the Tennessee-Ohio State matchup would have been a close game with Hooker at quarterback.
I'm sure, for sure. I completely agree. I'm sure there is some sort of mechanics tape-based thing that they would tell you. It'd be like, it just Kyler had everything or something like that. But maybe we need to get more NFL guys. We had Trevor Sycamore on here a few weeks ago. Maybe we need to get some more guys like that to come in here and just tell us, like, please explain to us what is it? Because this dude went on an 11-2 football team, led them to wins over some of the best teams in America, and still isn't getting his due. I'm not totally sure, but obviously in a few weeks we will find out. But before we move on, anything else with Pro Day, Zach, before we hit the high points on recruiting and stuff?
No, I think that should pretty much wrap it up. I mean, we're only a few weeks out from the draft at this point, and a lot of those draft boards are taking shape. Tennessee could possibly have 3 guys go in the first round if Hyatt, Hooker, and Wright somehow sneak in there. They should have at least 3 go in the first 2 rounds, maybe 4 or 5, depending on Tillman and Byron Young. And you got other guys like Jeremy Banks, Jerome Carvin, Princeton Fant, some other guys that possibly could be drafted in the late rounds as well. So it should be a pretty good year for Tennessee players going into the NFL.
I mean, speaking of recruiting, there's few things that are a better recruiting tool than getting your dudes taken in the first few rounds of the NFL draft.
Mm-hmm.
So hopefully that does come to fruition for Tennessee.